一想到我有100万件事要做，我就头疼。说实话，就是当你在一个游戏里有太多事情要干的时候，你反而就不知道该干嘛。其实和现实里是一样的逻辑。我记得我当时玩 Minecraft 的时候也有这个感觉，我玩模拟人生的时候有这个感觉，就是我不知道我到底要干嘛，因为太多事情要干。就比如说我现在，我是去造飞船，我是去造哨站，我是去装修我没装修完的家，我是去整理我的库存，我是去继续开我的图鉴，我还是干嘛？啊，还有那个一些 mod 一些那个 creations 加的任务我还没做，然后这一瞬间这个选择困难症就淹没了我，然后我就更不知道该干嘛。所以有的时候我打开这游戏的阻力会变大，就是因为我真不知道我要干嘛。不像很多游戏你打开我清楚知道我要干啥，星空这游戏现在东西我需要干的事已经可以列成一个清单了，但是你看这个东京地下城是吧，造了个框架，我之前说要造很多企业的那个总部在这里，我也没开始，但是这个也是一搞就搞好几个小时，甚至搞一整天，所以我现在这你看这半夜12点了快，我也不想搞这件事，那我就探索星球吧。而我今晚就别睡了。至于做梦的，那更是另一回事。继续去勘探星球。所以我们上次看到了斯特利克斯这个无人星系。目前我在斯特利克斯去过的所有星球都没有人类痕迹，所以我的问题就来了，是这整个星系都没有任何人类痕迹，还是只是说这个星球的人类痕迹非常少见，只在极个别的地方有啊？这是我现在有的问题。但无论如何我都要去搞明白这件事情。星球勘探数据库，斯特利克斯上次到 Alpha， 我们现在就继续前往 Alpha。给他拍张照，穿过这个陨石区小行星带呀。这里是我们还有哪一种没？银吗？还是铅啊？看看这边有山，哎哦，我们顺便要探那个植物。对了，山丘，冰封山丘，冰封山丘，山脉，银都在。如果要找山丘的话， 端太阳辐射。行医，没人你就来了是吧？你还停这么近，真是啊，给蹬鼻子上脸，真的是越停越近，越停越近，好家伙！不过星空的送温暖小队有个额外的好处，就是他送你回技能 CD 的补给品不说，他还额外送你那个这破投掷物不搞笑了。我操！大事不妙！我靠！fuck！力恢复移动速度，黑洞之心，远程伤害武器精度移动在于环形监狱上。这一大堆人没买，我现在用的是辐射限定的呢。现在谁没扫？啊，不是资源，是植物。植物，这鬼地方哪有植物？鸟不拉屎好吗？哪有植物？因为星空限定岂能卸完？那必须是摆在展示柜里一尘不染才行，定期擦一擦，怎么能拿来玩呢？因为辐射这个限定版手柄，说实话不是很好看。我说实话，辐射这个限定版手柄，单从外观上讲，我其实并不算喜欢。但星空那个我是真喜欢，简直就是艺术品，那是不能用的。辐射这个就随便啊。这地方说有植物，我是没看到，哪有植物？ 低端环境低温是吧？这有植物，这像有植物的样子。这是因为饱实度检查导致的。你每次关这个扫描仪的时候，它会给你进一次饱实度检查，起码我听说是这样子。这个是自从加了生存选项以后才会出现的问题，之前是不会这样子。我也不知道怎么他们打不打算修这个问题，确实是有点烦人，每次都这样卡一下。这哪有植物啊？这有植物？这光滑无比的大沙漠有植物？这是山丘，所以确实应该有。我怎么没看到，哪怕举目之处有一丝植物的样子？哎，还真有。真有。流血抗，刺伤辐射。不是，这个应该原版就行。你在地上本来就可以吧？我一直记得都可以的。记得从游戏开始就可以，只是我一般不用，因为我还是喜欢看它起飞，然后再降。但你这样可以快速看地形和那个生物群系探索进度。Mimic Pokeweed， 也不知道哪个 mod 把我的植物全搞成英文的。这植物还不好找，这个沙漠里植物特别稀疏，想必大家也看出来了，稀疏到一定地步，巨难找。这就为什么我刚才建了那个扫描仪，这样子我扫描仪的范围会远一些。这是什么玩意儿 ？Mimic Pokeweed。我现在搞这种事情。问题就是我甚至还要去翻那个 ESM 才能知道它中文叫什么。加载 Starfield。拟态商鹿草，为什么这玩意叫拟态商鹿草 ？What？ Mimic creatures 是什么呀？什么叫模仿生物啊？我怎么从来没见过什么东西叫 mimic creature？Mimic？ 让我想起 Prey 了，倒是。斯特利克斯3A 植物种 类。火山口山丘，标准螺旋堆积。Come on, Windows. 那我肯定会。不是辐射那个核冬天，我还是蛮喜欢的。核冬天模式我一直都说我挺喜欢的，只是没了，让我很难过。虽然我不会一直玩，但是偶尔玩我还是很想。做个殖民地大战的 PVP 其实也挺合适的。这怎么回事？啊，现在是正常。刚才这抓拍瞬间太离谱了，这大眼睛炯炯有神啊！看我们这大眼睛，这应该就是这个区域的。接下来的两个东西在哪？山脉、山丘已经没了。火山口，我们要去火山口。对了，我的 NASA 播客呢？之前不是说要一边漫游星球？之前听到哪儿？忘了之前听到哪儿？问题是，这很烦人，我当时应该记一下的。Episode 4，哇，这个 Houston We Have a Podcast 这个播客主题已经更了343集了，朋友们，343集。那当然是从第1集开始听了，这次我要记得我听到哪。
Houston, we have a podcast.Welcome to the official podcast of the NASA Johnson Space Center, Episode 1, International Space Station. I'm Gary Jordan, and I'll be your host today. So on this podcast, we'll be bringing in the experts, NASA scientists, engineers, astronauts.
如果你要像我这样的话，你要按住那个，如果你是手柄的话，你按住那个切换。
We're talking everything from extraterrestrial dirt to the unknown parts.
按住那个切换视角的那个键，然后你再转你的那个摇杆，你就可以看前面。
He's the public affairs officer for the space station
按住
program
不要
here at the
松
NASA
开。
Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. And we had a great discussion about what the International Space Station is, how it works, what it's made of, and why it's there. So with no further delay, let's go light speed and jump right ahead to our talk with Mr. Dan Hewitt. Enjoy.
T-minus 5 seconds and counting. Mark. Launch commit lights are correct. There she goes.
Houston, we have a podcast.
It's true, very true. So anyway, let's begin. I figured you're the perfect person to have here, being the public affairs officer of the International Space Station. You talk to scientists, astronauts, engineers constantly, so you're very aware of what's going on and everything about the space station. So for those of you listening, I think this is a good opportunity to learn just everything about it, right? So start from the very beginning. What is it?
Everything. Awesome. Well, to start in the beginning. No. So the space station it's a giant spaceship. I mean, it is the largest spacecraft that humans have ever built. And we haven't been flying in space for too long, relatively. I mean, we've been up there for 50 or 60 years. But the space station is kind of the pinnacle for what we've built so far. It is massive. I mean, this thing supports multiple people. It's been up there, at least pieces of it, since 1998. So that's another one of those factoid alerts that we always like to tell people. If you were born after the year 1998, the spacecraft's always been up there, but if you were born after November of 2000, as long as you've been alive, human beings have been living and working in space.
Wow.
We are aliens. We are a space-faring species. We are the ones off the planet. We've had people up there every single day for, as of right now, over 16 years. I mean, that is mind-blowing.
哦，原来
doing stuff every single day.
自从2000年的11月开始，
or get us ready to go further
每一天外太空都起码有都有人类进入。每一天，没有一天。
So you say stuff. We're doing stuff every day. Obviously, living up there, I think, is a big part of it, right? We're
这件事我还是第一次知道。
What is the stuff that's actually, that has that impact?
It's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of stuff. And I mean, it is, and it's divided up. It is as simple as just living in space. So just everything you do in space is a little bit different than the way you do it down here on Earth. I mean, it could be anything from going to the bathroom to how you eat to just how you get your water. Everything's different.
So it's like a way to practice, really, for things further out, because it's not really far up, right? It's only 250 miles. If you think about it, we're still in the Earth's protection. We're still protected by the Earth's magnetic field.
Well, space is funny in that going up, it feels like it's so far away in space, but it's 250 miles. That's not that far. I mean, I feel like the city of Houston is 250 miles. It's not, but I mean, 250 miles in a car is a short road trip, but 250 miles straight up, that's a rocket ride. It's a slightly different road trip, but it isn't that far away. I mean, we still kind of are right on the doorstep. There's a really great quote in the Paramount of space movies, Armageddon, where Owen Wilson says, we're not even in outer space yet. This is just like the beginning. And that's kind of where the station is. It's in space. It's in what we call low Earth orbit. So it's still pretty close. I mean, they could get in a Soyuz spacecraft and be back on the ground inside of a couple hours. So, I mean, you're still right on the doorstep. You're not really way out there yet. But it's getting us ready to go way out there.
Well, that's the whole, so NASA describes it as Earth reliant, right? So I kind of like the way they section it off, right? Earth reliant means exactly what you said, right? So if something goes wrong, you can just hop in a spacecraft and be home in 3 hours. And it's easy to get stuff there because it's only, some Soyuz rides have been as little as like 6 hours, right?
Relatively easy.
Going
to space
it's
is
only rocket science.
Don't want to trivialize it. It's still, and I even have to admonish myself. It's still not easy to go to space. It's still, it is rocket science. It's literal rocket science, which is hugely complex, and there's always inherent risk and all these other things. But when you start comparing it to going to Mars or, our far-flung aspirations of spreading throughout the solar system and the galaxy and everything, when you compare it to that, it's, doing hand quotes easy, but it's still a monumental undertaking.
Yeah. And that's why, so we're doing that, just like you said, in the future, we want to go farther, right? So we want to go to Mars. We want to really just expand our presence in the solar system. So the International Space Station is a great way to practice that. It's a good, you have a good understanding of what it takes to live in space, to operate in space. You can do a ton of science and learn how things interact. And then if you learn how things interact, you can design better systems to make them work better. I think one of the ones, capillary action, was a great one. Like the way that fluids move in in space is kind of cool because they sort of like create a ball and there's no down. So if you're trying to design like a system that like a rocket system, in order to propel fuel, the fuel isn't going to go down, right? It kind of needs to have that sort of capillary action and a path to get there. Just like those little tiny things are things that make the huge difference in being able to kind of explore the solar system.
Well, it all comes down
NASA.
to gravity, and that's kind of the ultimate differentiator between why everything we do in outer space is different from the way we do it on Earth.
Totally.
Some of the stuff you touched on is very apt. I mean, just moving fluids where, here on Earth, we almost take it for granted that everything settles towards the bottom. So in plumbing systems and everything, you can use that to your advantage. In space, you don't have that. And that affects everything from moving rocket fuel to, I'm an astronaut and I need to get a drink of water. Well, that system has to be specifically designed to work in the absence of gravity.
Yeah.
And we've had a lot of practice, since we've been flying in space, since the 60s. But the station is really the first place you've had on this scale. There have been space stations in the past, both from the US and Russia, but the space station is really the modern cutting-edge test bed for just doing and learning everything about living in space. And so you have all of these different technologies that, like I said earlier, everything you do in space is different from the way that you do it on planet Earth, where you have oxygen thanks to natural cycles, and you have trees scrubbing carbon dioxide from your atmosphere and producing oxygen back for you. You have water in lakes, reservoirs, literally raining down on you from the sky, where in space, none of that exists.
You have to create it.
You either have to bring it with you or find a way to create it.
Yeah.
And that's something that we're doing on the station right now, where you're trying to, and that's one of those key, we always talk about the different technologies that you need, and technology is a really broad term, but one of the ones that is a lot probably easier to understand is how we get those things, how you get the water, how you get the air just for the crew members. And one of the things you got to remember is, again, so we're close to Earth right now, so we can launch water, we can launch air, we can launch all of these things to these crew members, but when they go to Mars, there's no resupply ship. There's no, hey, the water tank's getting low, let's stop off here and tap it off. You can't do that. So you gotta bring everything with you, and everything is heavy. So the more stuff you bring with you, the more fuel you need, the more expensive your mission, and it just kind of compounds on and on and on and on and on. And I'm gonna ramble here for a while because I love this subject.
Okay, well, I'll kind of, I'm not going to stop you. I'm going to kind of redivert you. So
Okay.
one of the things on the International Space Station they're doing now to do exactly that. So you said things are heavy, right? Water. Water especially is very heavy.
Yes.
I forget the cost per pound in order to launch
Always
water.
varies.
Oh, it always varies. Okay, that's good to know. But I know one way they're actually doing, helping that out for long duration missions is recycling. And the recycling system is just top notch. So good that they actually brought the technology back down to Earth, and then actually is helping out third world countries with, not access to any kind of clean drinking water. It's like the filtration system is that good. They drink their own urine, and it captures sweat and stuff like that, right?
They do, and that's always a fun ill moment for little kids and stuff when you tell them that. And there's the famous astronaut saying that yesterday's coffee is tomorrow's coffee. To where that's what you have to do.
Yesterday's
you have these weight
coffee
limits,
is
and you're in this
tomorrow's
environment
coffee.
where, outside
Wow.
your four metal walls is just a vacuum of nothingness. You have to find ways to conserve all those things. And we know very well here on planet Earth that conservation is a very important facet of life. We
Very
try
true.
to do it through recycling and any number of things. It's 10 times more important when you're in space and there is no corner store that you can run to and pick up some water. So
The only things you have are the things you bring
Yes.
with you.
And so to recycle the water, they collect water from all different sources, whether it's the astronauts' urine, which is a major source, their sweat, condensation in the cabin, any kind of wastewater gets fed through a treatment system, which purifies the water and then puts it back out on the other side for them to continue to reuse. And the percentages seem to vary, but I mean, we're reclaiming at least 85% of the astronauts' urine back into potable water, so drinkable water. I mean, that's incredible. And as you alluded to, we've actually taken that water recycling technology and made it available, and it's been used in disadvantaged areas of the world that don't have access to clean drinking water. And so that's just a great example of here's a technology that we need for outer space. You know, we're trying to solve a problem off this world where we have the problem, and then we find a completely different use for this technology that it wasn't necessarily designed for. I mean, scientists didn't set out to develop a water filtration system for places without clean drinking water on Earth.
Right.
But it ended up having a use there. And that's, we call them spin-offs. And that's, you know, there's a lot of famous ones throughout NASA's history. That's just an example of one that came about with all the space station.
Oh yeah, you've heard of them. There's a lot of them, right? There's like memory foam is another one, and like insulation for your house, stuff like that. All that
There's a lot, and we produce something called Spin-Offs Magazine, where it goes through just about every spin-off, every technological spin-off that's come from space-based research that's used here on Earth.
Yeah.
And that's just a symptom of doing research and development, of this kind of funded research and development. People can find novel uses for technologies that were designed for one thing, completely different.
我操，
Totally.
怎么回
Okay,
事？
so let's take a step back, and so we're talking about all the experiments and like the reason that we're up there. Who's up there right now? So you said like, you know, if you're 16 and a half, right? I think is the number. If you're 16 and a half or younger, you've never lived at a time where people haven't been in space. How many people are in space right now?
6.
6, and it's international, right? So we have 2 Americans, right?
Yeah, so international is the first word we use in the station. Sure. International Space Station. So there's always an international crew up there. So right now there's 2 Americans, Peggy Whitson and James Monroe, 1 French astronaut, Thomas Pesquet, and 3 Russian cosmonauts. And so you have crew members. We've had crew members from, and I'd have to look up the exact number, but I mean countries all over the globe have flown crew members on board the space station.
Oh yeah, I want to say
And
18. I think is the number. 18.
I think
different
18 is the
countries.
latest, and you've had well over 200 individuals travel to the space station, and it is this global effort. You have 15 countries that are considered the main partnership, so these are the countries that signed all the papers and did everything back in the 90s to form this partnership. And you have 5 main agencies. You have NASA here in the US, the Canadian Space Agency right to our north, the European Space Agency, which actually incorporates a lot of different space agencies from all over Europe into one larger conglomeration, the Russian Space Agency Roscosmos, and the Japanese Space Agency called JAXA, the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency.
Right.
And so lots of agencies, but all of this alphabet soup comes together to make the station possible. And so everything that gets done just about is done in this big collaboration. So you have these countries with drastic language barriers, cultural differences, sometimes governmental differences, all working together on this massive multi-billion-dollar piece science research project.
I think it's fair to say that space exploration is really a global interest, right? I mean, exploring the cosmos, it's not just a U.S. unique thing. It is really an international effort to make that possible.
It's something that will, as it does now and will certainly in the future, involve the human race, not just one country. I mean, especially as we continue to expand upon what we've done on the International Space Station, and we've even recognized that future missions, there's a lot of reasons to increase international collaboration, whether it's drawing on other countries' expertise. One country's much better at doing one type of engineering than we are, and vice versa, or they have some kind of novel science. There's also the pooling of resources, which can a lot of times be a major driver. Going to Mars, going to other places is going to be pretty expensive.
Yeah.
And so it makes a lot more sense to shoulder that burden across several countries who all have this kind of shared interest, will probably have different main goals, which is true. It's even true on board the space station. Different agencies have different priorities for their research, but we all have that common goal of exploring space, improving the situation for people back here on Earth, and trying to push out further into the cosmos, into the galaxy, into, making Star Wars a reality, that kind of thing.
Well, Star Trek.
Or Star Trek, Star Trek.
Star Wars, we don't need to fight.
Yeah.
See, I think one of my favorite things, really, when you think about like global participation, is the way that the modules were designed. So, like, each of them were just given specifications. This is how it needs to be built, and they built them all over the world, and then launched them up into space and connected them for the first time in space. Really, everyone had to be working together constantly to make sure that actually happened. And then you have to launch it into space, then you have to connect it in space, make sure it works, make sure all the systems are integrated. It's crazy.
It is, and again, that comes back to you have these countries with language barriers, completely different ways of engineering and everything, but we built the station piece by piece in outer space. Like you just said, none of these things were connected on the ground the first time, so you better make sure that when you send it up to space, it's gonna, you didn't build a square peg for a round hole kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there are definitely ways to share that knowledge, to share the technology, to make sure that all of you can agree on standards, essentially, to make sure everything talks to each other, all the different electronics or all the different structural systems, all of these different things. But it was still monumental to build this piece by piece. I mean, it was literally done piece by piece. You had elements launched on either Russian Proton rockets or carried up in the space shuttle, where it would arrive, a big robotic arm would reach in and grab it out of the shuttle payload bay, and then they'd attach it, and you might have to do spacewalks, I mean, unfurling solar arrays, and all these gigantic tasks. And it was done piece by people talking and working together all over the planet. And there's really not another engineering project or even big project like that exists.
I think it has been described as one of the greatest engineering feats in human history.
Not to toot our own horn, but I would certainly argue that building a football-sized million-pound spacecraft in space is definitely up there.
Yeah, that is definitely. I would rank it number one. But yeah, who am I to say,
We're
right?
biased.
A little bit biased.
We're a little biased.
So okay, let's kind of think about like what it looks like, right, and how it operates. So we talked about how you don't have access to. You can't just walk outside, or you can't drill for more resources. Everything has to be there. So it's got to have power. It's got to have air. It's got to have water. It's got to have all these things. So power. Where does it get its main power?
The sun.
The sun.
Everything comes from the sun. No, it's incredible, and a lot of spacecraft do this because you have the sun. I mean, the sun is, we have solar energy here on Earth, but in outer space you can have even more direct access to the sun.
It's a very readily available energy source in space
that we know how to harness.
True.
We know how to make solar arrays, and we have gigantic ones on board the station. So all the power on station is generated through solar energy. And we had talked about, they see 16 sunrises and sunsets a day. So about half the time they're in complete darkness. So there is no sun. So what you have is these great big solar arrays that are generating power, and then there's a bunch of batteries on board. And the solar arrays are just charging up those batteries, so every time they slip behind the Earth again and they're in nighttime, those batteries are just supplying power to everything. But it's 100% solar, renewable, clean sun energy.
Very
It's
true.
all solar energy.
And they're massive, right? They're so big and they produce so much power that actually they do have to like kind of get rid of some of that power, because it's a little bit redundant, right? Just in case one of them breaks, like you still have enough power to power the whole thing.
You do have redundancy built in. Redundancy is one of our favorite words. Redundancy is a fancy word for backup plan.
Yeah.
And at NASA, you have backup plans for your backup plans. So yeah, even if you lose, we call them power channels. If you lose one, you lose two, you can still power the majority of all of your systems on board. And even going beyond that, if you lose, a much larger amount of power. You can still power your key systems and everything. You might just power down other things temporarily while you fix the problem. But they generate pretty much a comparable amount to keep everything that we want on board, and that's all the life support, that's keeping the lights on, that's running all of the experiments on board, all of the different hardware, just keeping the station, oriented in the right attitude and flying it in any time. I mean, everything
Right.
is powered by the solar arrays. And it doesn't generate an overwhelming excess of energy by any means, because again, you are spending a lot of time in darkness, so those batteries are getting used pretty much constantly.
Oh, yeah.
We're in the process of swapping the batteries. We're upgrading.
Yeah.
We've already upgraded 1/4 of them.
We switched out nickel hydrogen for lithium ion, right?
That is correct.
That's right. Lithium ion. They're way more efficient, right?
Yeah, but that's the power story. It's all solar energy through those big, and they are very large. And we come back to the football field, the American football field analogy.
We haven't
again.
clarified that yet, have we?
That the solar arrays are basically each solar array is the size of an end zone, and there are 8 of those. Yes, that are the size of an end zone. Or
I think like a
there
pair of
are
four of them.
A pair
right?
of 4. So
Yeah.
4. It's tough because like one pair is actually 2 array blankets, but they're very large.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so that's power, right? So we already talked about water because you need to recycle water and make sure you have enough, and water's very expensive to launch. And if you recycle it, it's a lot more efficient and it's very, very clean. So what about air, right? That's one thing. You think about like what a human needs: shelter, water, food. You didn't really think about air, but that's something you definitely need in space.
That's something we kind of take for granted. That air is just it's air. It's everywhere down here. But
Right.
up there, you're in a sealed environment. You're basically in a big sealed tin can, and you need to fill that with air. So we can launch air, just like we can launch water. You can launch a tank of super pressurized air, usually in its liquid form, and then feed it into the atmosphere. But the main way we get it is from water. We use a system called the oxygen generation system that actually takes water, splits the a water molecule into oxygen and hydrogen. And then we can take that oxygen and pump it into the atmosphere. And they aren't in the pure oxygen atmosphere, so there's other stuff in there. There's a lot of nitrogen.
Sure.
So
Very similar to Earth's atmosphere, right?
Yeah,
Same-
they're basically in
same
the exact
composition.
same composition atmosphere that we have on Earth, and actually the same pressure too. So there's no big difference there. That feeds into some of the stuff they have to do for spacewalks, but that's a completely different tangent I can go on. But so we split the water molecules, so then you have your oxygen, which you can just feed directly back into the cabin, and then you have hydrogen, which you can vent overboard if you just build up a bunch of excess hydrogen, or there's a process in a payload up there. It's more of a technology demonstration, so it's not really in the critical path, so it's not a critical piece that we have to have running at all times, but it's called the Sabatier. It uses the Sabatier process, where you can take that hydrogen that you had left over from your water, and then you can take the carbon dioxide that gets scrubbed out of the atmosphere by a different device. You split that carbon dioxide, you now have oxygen, and then you have your leftover hydrogen. You combine those two, and you got more water.
Boom.
And so you can kind of build, the ideal is to build, we call it a closed loop. So everything that gets put into this life support loop, it's a big circle, just constantly gets recycled. You got your water, you drink your water, you recycle your water, you take some of that water, you turn it into air and oxygen, you take that excess hydrogen, you combine it with CO2 that the astronauts are breathing out, you make more water. And so it's all just kind of constantly going around in a circle. And that way you get the absolute most out of everything you send up there.
That's crazy. You actually have to create an atmosphere, right?
Yes.
Up there. It's not like Earth where it kind of does it for us. You actually have to make it work. That's
Yes.
crazy. I like the Sabatier system. That's cool. He says a technology demonstration. I thought it was like part of the whole thing because I know they called it a partially closed loop because, like you said, you can inject the hydrogen if you have too much, right? So but yeah, same concept. So, okay, so they have air, they have water, they have power, they have all kinds of stuff. So let's talk about some of the experiments. I know one of the biggest one is the experiment on themselves, right? So in order to actually function beyond low Earth orbit and actually function in space, you have to learn how the human body reacts in space and what happens. So I think the biggest thing, maybe it's not the biggest thing, but it's definitely very important, is bone loss and muscle degradation, right? So that is, if you're in space for too long and you're just kind of floating around, your bones start to exhibit symptoms of osteoporosis and your muscles start to degrade. So how do they counter that?
Yeah. Well, when we talk research, there's kind of two different camps. There's the research that we're doing on board the station to get us ready to go on to Mars, explore the solar system, all of those other things, which is a lot of what you were just talking about. And then there's the research that has direct applications on Earth, and we can dive into that too. But that's research flown by commercial companies, by academia, taking advantage of this microgravity environment, because we've seen there's a lot you can learn by taking gravity out of the equation. But to the first camp, to the studying the people, the astronauts are guinea pigs kind of thing. The human body is an incredible machine, and it's incredible at adapting to different environments. I mean, that's both a gift and a curse, because when you go into outer space, I mean, your vestibular system, so your sense of up is down, down is up, your balance, all of that goes all out of whack. But within about a day or two, most astronauts don't have the nausea anymore. Their body is used to it already, and they're able to live and work, which that's incredible. That's a great advantage to just getting into a new environment and hitting the ground running. The problem with that is when you get to an environment where you have gravity again, hitting the ground running can be very problematic because your body, when gravity is not pulling down on you. So you and I right now, I mean, gravity is pushing down at all times, and that builds up muscles in your hips and bones in your
斯特利克斯
hips.
3在背后升起，
Your legs are strong enough to just
往看
hold you upright because they're constantly fighting against that force. On places like the space station, that force disappears. And so your body says, well, I don't need these muscles anymore, so it stops feeding nutrients to those. And so you can actually, astronauts will dispel, so in their urine they'll get raised levels of calcium because their bones aren't needing it as much, because their bones aren't getting that much force just by existing.
They're getting rid of the calcium because you're right, it doesn't.
为什
the
么这
body's
边
saying you don't
少
need
一
this
种
anymore.
植
And
物？
so understanding a lot of those processes is important because, I mean, if the astronauts were just going to stay in microgravity forever, not that big of a deal because their body just adapts and, I mean, they become space people. But astronauts come back to Earth. Astronauts will walk on Mars where there is gravity. Less gravity, but still gravity. And you're going to need to walk around in a pretty heavy spacesuit, things like that. So finding ways to counteract, call them countermeasures, for all the ways the body adapts it's something that we've been doing pretty much as long as we've been doing spaceflight, but we really aggressively pursued it on board the space station. So, for example, bone loss and muscle loss. We've actually pretty much reversed, for the most part, all of the bone loss and muscle loss. You'll still see changes in bone density in some of the crew members, but a lot of them aren't losing that bone mass, that muscle mass that was such a problem in early long-duration space flight. And we do that through exercise. That is the main driver. There's
the secret.
exercise and there's nutrition. But exercise, the crew members are working out about 2 hours every single day. I don't know about you, but I don't work out 2 hours every single day.
30 minutes, I'm pretty much done.
Yeah. Even that can be hard for some people to find, but the crew members, 2 hours every single day. And that's exercise, both cardio and resistance. So they have a number of devices up there. They have a treadmill. which, again, you need to remember everything, and this is the running theme, everything we do in microgravity is different. So you can't just hop on a treadmill. You'll just float away, and you'll just be pumping your legs in microgravity, and that does nothing for you. So the treadmill actually has a harness with basically bungee cables that pulls them down towards the treadmill. So that way you're getting the force in your legs, you're actually exerting more force, and you can run. It's the closest you can get to just running in space. And I mean, we've had astronauts run marathons on the treadmill, and that's one of their key devices. They also have something called the Advanced Resistive Exercise Device. I've stayed away from acronyms as much as possible.
You're doing a great job
so far, but they inevitably come up. We call it ARED.
Right.
And it's basically their home gym on board the station. Now again, you can't just pick up a heavy weight and do some curls and get a workout. It doesn't
Weightlifting
work
makes
like
no
that.
sense in microgravity.
Yeah, there's microgravity. So I mean, they literally move several 100-pound modules and pieces of hardware all the time. And so to help simulate weightlifting, it actually uses a series of pneumatic tubes to simulate force. And they can actually simulate up to 600 pounds of force.
Nice.
Which some of the astronauts, their squat number goes up when they're up there. And it's slightly misleading because they're not squatting their own body weight like they are here on Earth.
Right. It's still 600 pounds. I don't think
I don't think any of them do 600 pounds, but they have the option if we ever get some power lifters
one day
up on board the station. And then they also have a stationary bicycle. And then there's another treadmill. So there's two treadmills on board the station. But I mean, they use all of those 2 hours a day, and that's just to maintain that bone and muscle. And there's also ways you can help that process through nutrition. We're constantly looking, is there a better way for them to work out? Should they do? I mean, there are research projects like Sprint, where does it make sense for them to work out, a lot harder, but for a shorter amount of time?
like high intensity interval.
Yeah. Because 2 hours is a long time every single day.
Right.
That's a lot to ask.
And crew time is very valuable, right? Because you're talking about, like you said, 200 experiments per increment, right? And astronauts
250 is the usual number in like
Per
a 6
6
month
months,
span. 250 experiments will happen on board the station.
That's crazy. So yeah, crew
a
time
lot.
is very valuable, and that's 2 hours gone every day from experiment time, just to maintain bone and muscle mass.
Yep.
Wow.
But I mean, that's just one part of what changes when you're in microgravity.
Oh yeah.
I mean, your body actually has less blood in it by the time you come home. Your heart can change sizes because it doesn't work as hard to pump the blood. And then one of the big outstanding ones that we're still addressing is vision changes. And that's something that we knew about, but was never really considered a huge deal. Not a huge deal, but never really considered a major impact until within the last couple of years, when we had a significant amount of astronauts returning from these really long stays in space and reporting that their vision was worse. And it's normal to come back to Earth and have a couple of changes that linger for a little while. But for these crew members, the vision never got better.
Wow.
That's a concern. If you send somebody to Mars and in the 9 months or however long it ends up taking to get there, all of a sudden they go from 20/20 to needing glasses to needing even stronger glasses that they don't have available, and they land on Mars and they can't see. That's a big issue.
That's a big one.
And so we're trying to figure out exactly why this happens. There's a number of good ideas, good hypotheses. We think we know, but we're still doing a lot of tests to figure out exactly why it happens. And just like the bone and muscle, how do we stop that from happening?
So you got to find those countermeasures to make that happen. Wow, that's really intense. I mean, imagine landing on Mars and you can't see anything.
It'd be kind of a buzzkill. Travel 60 million miles and get out and everything's blurry. That wouldn't make me happy.
So I know, when here's another thing. When astronauts now they're doing on the International Space Station pretty regularly, they're doing long duration increments, right? So they're doing 6 months at a time.
Yes.
So this is longer than any of the shuttle missions or a lot of the missions before it, and it's all to practice for missions missions beyond low Earth orbit. But when they come back to Earth, right, they generally, right now, they come back in a Soyuz, land in Kazakhstan, and then we have recovery teams that go out and get them. But they have a hard time walking, right, when they first get out.
Some do. And so that's part of, again, the human body reacting to the different environments. When astronauts first get into space, some will have nausea, some will have some adverse reactions to being in microgravity. The same is true when you're in microgravity for a really long time and you come back down to Earth. All of a sudden there's this huge weight pressing down on you that hasn't been there for the last 6 months or however long you were there. There's your inner ear goes crazy again, like, oh, all the fluids pulling down again. Where am I? There used to be no up and down, but now all of a sudden there's definitely a down. And so it can be tough just to walk. I mean, we have teams that pretty much carry the astronauts out of the spacecraft and then onto a medical tent. So we try to minimize any of that real discomfort and things like that for these crew members. But they are still test subjects, and so we still do stuff to them.
Right.
And part of that is when, let's say you're the first person to go to Mars, when you land, there's not going to be anybody there to pull you out of your capsule or help you set up camp.
Right.
Or anything like that.
I'm on my own.
You're on your own. And so we need to make sure before we send somebody, how much can they do on their own? And we have these crew members coming back from extended periods in space, and we have the ability to test them. And now, every astronaut is an incredibly gracious person because not a lot of this testing isn't glamorous.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it can be
You used
a
the word
little
guinea pig. Right?
uncomfortable. They are guinea pigs
In a way,
almost
yeah.
every sense of the word,
Yeah.
where they are subjecting themselves to pokes, prods, blood samples, all these different things.
For science.
For science.
Right.
For science, yeah. But one of the things that we do, and we started doing within the last couple of years, is called the field test.
Right.
So they'll come home, they'll land in the middle of Kazakhstan, pull them out of the capsule, and then we subject them to a series of, they sound really simple, but it's just functional tests. And it's things like walking a straight line, sitting down and standing up, laying down and standing up and having somebody push you a little bit. It's all of these things that, that sounds really easy. Like, can I stand up? I could be an astronaut. Well,
Right.
after spending 6 months in space, it can be a little jarring. It can be a little difficult. And all of that feeds back into the research of, okay, I'm a Mars astronaut. I've been in space for, 6 to 9 months on this trip. I'm now in a gravity environment. You need to design the spacecraft, the habitat, everything to understand that, hey, for the first couple hours, this person might have to just sit in their chair and do nothing. Or, no, we can reasonably expect them to pop up and, do these simple things. They might not be able to get out of their spacesuit for a couple hours. All of these different things have to be figured out before you just shove people into a spacecraft, kick them off the planet, and send them somewhere else. But we're doing that. We're doing that right now.
Yeah.
哇，那边又是什么？我靠，
Their
这
job is
景
not
这
done
景
when they-
太好了，这景。
The
Oh,
ground.
no. Oh, no.
You're finally,
It's
after 6
太
months
好
being
了。
away from home, you hit the ground and you're like, I'm finally done.
哎呦，
They make you stand up, sit down, do all kinds of
这
crazy
这
stuff.
星
And
星
it
又离得
doesn't stop
这么
there.
近，
Oh, that's right.
And it's
天呐！
and again, when I say they are truly gracious people, they have to sacrifice a lot for this. I mean, obviously they get the great view and they're in outer space, and that's amazing. But I mean, just training for these missions is usually about 2 years. So that's 2 years of you in intensive training, a lot of travel to all the other partner countries where they train you on different things. 6 months, so off the planet with you and just 5 of your closest friends, but away from all of your family, everything else happening in your life down here on Earth. You can't, beyond a phone call and an email, you can't really interact with it. And then when they come home, we shove them in a tent and push them around and make them stand up and do all these other things, and then fly them back, and then the testing continues. I mean, they keep giving samples, they keep doing eye exams. Scott Kelly landed in his 1-year mission a little over a year ago. He was just here doing more tests. And
Right.
I mean, it is a real commitment on behalf of these astronauts to do these flights in space. But again, what they're doing is going to help future astronauts. It's going to help future explorers. I mean, everybody down the line will benefit from the work that they're doing.
That's right. You have a diverse crew of our astronaut class, I guess. All the astronauts, you got all kinds of different people, and they all do the same thing. So the more that you do, the more you really have an understanding of what's going to happen in general, like on average. I mean, it's like a big sample size, right? So when you're doing an experiment, you just keep doing the same experiments and big sample size, and you can learn a lot.
Yeah. And any researcher will tell you that you need more subjects. You need as many subjects as you can. And they always want more people. And the more, the better the results you can get. And it's a good point when you say like they're diverse. They are. Where if you think the early days of astronauts, it was all male test pilots. That's all it was.
Right.
Now, you still have a lot of military astronauts, but it's a much more heterogeneous mixture. There's a lot of different parts in there where you have a lot more scientists, you have teachers, you have engineers, you have we have an astronaut who was up there last year who's a biomedical scientist who has done research on AIDS in Africa. They come from all of these different walks of life.
Yeah.
And because a lot of the work that they're doing on station right now, it's not like it used to be. I mean, you're not flying a space shuttle anymore. You are essentially a researcher or a research subject for 6 months while you're up there. So they're coming from all walks of life now. And that's going to continue and just expand more as more and more types of people and more people gain access to space, which is the ultimate goal. I mean, ultimately, we want everybody, if they want, to be able to go to outer space.
Right.
I want to go to outer space.
I think I want to say we all do, but I know there's people who don't. They're like, I'm fine on the Earth. Yeah.
Again, it's space, so there's always the inherent risk in everything.
Right.
And there are people who, there's always somebody who doesn't like something. That'll never change. But
well, regardless, that's what the International Space Station is helping us to accomplish. It's really helping us to understand that, so that can actually be a possibility later. And the more we do it, the more we learn, the more it can actually become a reality. The fact that it's a reality now is pretty awesome, that we can actually do this. Well, Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show. I think that's about all the time we have today.
I feel like I just got started.
I know.
I've left out so many things that people are going to yell at me about.
Well, I have like a bunch of questions in front of me. And I don't think I think I asked one. I think we just kind of talked afterwards. But thanks again for coming on. Probably have to do another podcast just on the International Space Station.
Oh, we're going to have to
That was just like skimming the surface.
We're going to do dozens.
International Space Station 1, 2, 3, 12, 13.
let's make it an anthology.
That'll be awesome. Dan, thanks again. And stay tuned for after the credits or music here to learn where you can submit your ideas and all that kind of stuff.
Dock of the space shuttle.
Roger, 0G, and I feel fine.
Shuttle has cleared the tower.
Attainment for all mankind.
Actually, a huge honor to break a record like this.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Houston, welcome to space.
Hey, thanks for sticking around. So today we talked a lot about the International Space Station, but really just kind of skimmed the surface. If you really want to dive deep into some of the topics that we talked about today, and maybe some things we didn't talk about, just go to nasa.gov/ISS. That's our homepage. That's where all the latest scientific experiments and updates and findings and everything going on with the International Space Station, launches, landings, it's all updated regularly. We have a blog that we like to maintain on that page, as well as all the astronauts that you can follow, the ones both on the space station and not on the space station. On social media, we're very active. On Facebook, it's International Space Station, Twitter, @space_station, and on Instagram, it's @ISS. Go to any one of those platforms, and we update those regularly. You can even use the hashtag AskNASA on your favorite platform to submit an idea or maybe a question that you have for this podcast. Just make sure to mention that it's for Houston. We have a podcast, or maybe HWAP, I guess, would be the acronym for that. We'll probably have to fix that, but just mention us and we'll try to address your question in one of the later podcasts. This podcast was recorded on March 17th, 2017. Thanks to Alex Perryman and John Stoll for helping record the episode, and of course thanks to Dan Hewitt for coming on the show. So this show is intended to be weekly, and we have a few episodes kind of sitting in the bank, so it may be a few episodes before we get to your question on social media, but please keep them coming. And thanks for listening. So until next week.
太美了，真的这地方，我靠！我没想到又是一次普通的星球探索能见到这种景色。我以为这只是一次例行的登记，结果沉醉于其中，不知不觉又过去了许久。
Houston, we have a podcast. Welcome to the official podcast of the NASA Johnson Space Center, episode...
那可以用这个听。好事儿。这个好啊，有书签了吗？这不是 ？What the fuck is this？啊，300多集，不是 release。2018年5月。哎，刚才那 International Space Station 也不是第一集啊，看来。奇怪，哦，它这只有300集。等等，那他这不全。为什么这集听不了？嗯？这集没声音，我靠！哦，怎么被静音了？
We have a podcast. Welcome to the official podcast of the NASA Johnson Space Center, Episode 2, your 2017 astronaut class. I'm Gary Jordan, and I'll be your host today. So on this podcast, we bring in the experts, NASA scientists, engineers, astronauts, pretty much all the folks that have the coolest information, the stuff you really want to know, right on the show and talk about everything NASA. So today we're talking about the new astronaut class of 2017 with Ann Romer. She's the manager of the astronaut selection office here at the NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. And we had a great discussion about the astronaut candidate class of 2017, who they are, what they bring to the table, and why these 12 people were chosen out of more than 18,000 applicants. I also had a chance to talk with them all at the same time, but I only had a few minutes, so I thought it would be fun to play 2 truths and a lie to get to know them a little bit better. And I'm not adding any fluff when I say that they are a truly outstanding group of people, not only with their insane qualifications and expertise, but also with their personalities. And we'll play that segment today on this episode. So with no further delay, let's go light speed and jump right ahead to our talk with Miss Ann Romer. Enjoy.
Mark. Launch commit light circle.
把那个拆。
Houston, we have a podcast.
Well, now, so Ann, you're coming right out of, I guess, the frying pan, or out of the fire into the frying pan. That's how it goes, a little bit. Last week we actually did the astronaut selection event. We had our 12 new astronauts of the class of 2017 come on, and we got to meet them all, in a sense. And the media were talking to them. So you are the person that's responsible, kind of, in a way, with your team, for selecting those 12 astronauts. So that must have been quite a process, huh?
It was a ginormous process, actually. Certainly from the beginning, we weren't anticipating that we'd have over 18,000 applications. So that was a surprise to us. And then certainly reading through all of those and at all the various checkpoints along the way to get to the event last week where we
太漂亮了，这地方。
it was an exciting week for NASA. So certainly there was a whole team of people involved in getting us from that 18,000 point down to where we were last week, but it was an honor to participate.
So what were those last couple weeks like leading up to last week, to the actual reveal? Did it get progressively more crazy as you got to that point?
Certainly. There's always a little bit of lag between when we know who we've selected and when we actually communicate with the candidates. And so that's probably one of the most interesting times because you're excited and you certainly want to share the good news. But again, when we had decided to do the live announcement, we had kind of had a timeline that we had mapped out with them. And then certainly when we added the vice presidential visit to come and help us announce that, which was just really positive for NASA.
Yeah.
But that certainly spooled up the intensity around the event that we hosted last week, where we got to share with the world who we'd picked.
For sure. And are you kind of glad it's over, or is it still not over?
I'm sleeping a little bit better this week than I was last week. So yes, I'm definitely relieved and certainly happy. NASA, I think, did an amazing job of picking these 12 and right, it was an exciting moment, I think, for NASA to get to share that with everyone.
Yeah, just, I mean, we had to take them around and help them out with their portraits and stuff on the public affairs side. We had to take them around with the portraits and let them talk to media. We did it right at the AMA, so I got to talk with them just a little bit and get to know them a little bit better, and they were just a fantastic group of people. In fact, I got a less than 20 minutes with them in their jam-packed day talking to the media to get to know them a little better. So to do that, I thought it would be really fun to play Two Truths and a Lie, the game. So they wrote down 3 statements, 2 of them are true, 1 of them's false, and then they just start guessing which one is the lie and get to know them a little bit better. And at that time they had been so busy that they hadn't had to get a chance to know each other, so they were taking wild guesses. But man, when I told them the game, they were like, okay, you know, it's a little bit different from what they were normally playing, but they just went right into it. It was a great group of people. So I thought it would be really fun to start with that segment, playing 2 Truths and a Lie with the 12 astronauts, and just kind of get to know them. You get to know their first names a little bit and a little bit more about them, but then we'll come back and kind of talk more about who they are and what they do. So, producer Alex, let's play the wormhole sound effect thingy. Okay, welcome to the astronaut class of 2017. It's been a crazy couple of days for you guys. What with the announcement coming here, you've had a lot of interviews so far, and we've gotten to know just a little bit about you, but I thought we'd do something a little bit more fun today by doing 2 Truths and a Lie. So if you're not familiar with the game, each one of you has a piece of paper, and you've written down 2 true statements about yourself and 1 false statement. So let's see how well you know each other now and see if you can guess which thing is the lie. I think we'll start by just going in alphabetical order. It seems like this is how we did the announcement and how we've been doing most things. So Kayla, let's start with you. Your 2 truths and a lie.
Awesome. Love going first. It's always a good thing here. So my first statement here is I've never lost a game of charades.
Lie.
My second statement is I predicted my little sister's birth. And my third statement was I was once part of a competitive wine tasting team.
I believe that.
It's out there.
Have you ever played charades?
Can't answer that.
What's the ROE on question asking? Is it outright guess?
What do you mean you predicted the birth? Like,
can't answer that.
It's called
that there was going to be a baby?
That seems pretty loose. That's without definition. I think that's pretty loosely. I don't have a sister count.
I don't know, his belly's awesome.
Yeah, charades. She's probably never played charades.
I think that's the line, yeah. I think so.
Well, she's never played
You guys got it right. I will. It was based on a truth. I've actually never lost a game of Pictionary. So if anybody's up to challenge that run, and I've played a lot of Pictionary. So, but good job, guys.
Turn off the
Not
cameras.
bad.
We're playing Pictionary.
Definitely need to know more about the competitive wine tasting. That sounds awesome.
So I went to the University of Cambridge for grad school, and it's an interesting place. I call it Disney World for nerds because it's just like not real life. But one of their varsity sports there is blind wine tasting, wherein you do first a white round, then a red round, where they pour you 6 glasses of wine from like wine bottles in bags, so you can't see anything about it. And then you have to identify a bunch of like nerdy characteristics, like tasting notes, how much alcohol, sugar content, acidity level, where it was grown, etc. I will say that I did not make the varsity squad due to actually drinking my wine at practice as opposed to spitting it out. So, but it was a good time for sure.
That sounds awesome. Well, okay, so next we'll move on to Zenith.
Okay, let's see. First of all, I absolutely hate mushrooms. I will not eat them. I will not touch them. 2, I am really good at bowling. And 3, I'm really good at etch-a-sketching. I've never broken 100. I'm so bad.
So etch-a-sketching, what's the coolest thing you've drawn on an etch-a-sketch?
I did a portrait of Bob Dylan in high school that was really good. And then at the very end, I decided to write his name, but I forgot the L in Dylan, and I had to do it over again.
No.
Are you good at staircases?
Yes.
That's probably the best thing I can do.
There's no undo button. Yeah, circles are still tricky though.
Awesome. Okay, Raja, let's move on to you.
All right, so I used to slice deli meat for a living. I met Neil Armstrong when I was 5, and my flight lead stopped me from flying into North Korea.
Deli meat.
Neil Armstrong.
Deli meat. Neil Armstrong.
Neil Armstrong.
Only because they asked yesterday if anybody had ever met Neil Armstrong.
Okay. How fast can you slice a deli meat?
Pretty fast. My wife and I actually worked at Hy-Vee for a while, and we sliced deli meat in the deli section. She actually lost it.
没开加速器。
But reattached. So.
All right. Very cool, and definitely need to know the story behind almost flying into North Korea.
So there's a restricted area, and there's obviously a lot of airfields in that area. And so I was a young wingman, and we were doing practice target attacks, and we were just split from each other, and I was doing a talk on, we call it, to an airfield, and I was getting really close. I'm like, man, I can break out and counting things on the runway, and all of a sudden my flight lead realizes that is not a South Korean airfield that I'm describing. That is a North Korean airfield, and calls me south before anything worse happened. But yeah, I was fat, dumb, and happy, like into this scenario, like here's you got this, describing everything I saw on the ground, which was actually really something over there on the ground, but yeah.
Well, now you have an amazing amount of flight experience too, so I'm sure some things you're gonna learn from. Awesome. Okay, so Matt, you're up.
All right, my 3 things here.
这是 NASA 在
I climbed
讲
10
的一个宇航员招募的
I rode on the crew team in college.
宇航员招募的录
And I
音。
won a gift wrapping competition during the holiday season at the Container Store.
I really hope the container thing is true. That'd be awesome.
He was on the road.
That's true. Is it?
Alright.
Which one has also climbed 10?
What was the first?
He was a rower.
The climbing
Saying more
10,
than that.
14.
What's the guess?
There's in Colorado.
Official guess.
14ers is the lie.
All right.
I've climbed 0. I've only driven up them.
I climbed one and it's a pretty funny story.
So I'm guessing you have a record for the gift wrapping competition then, right?
No, I was
You don't
just
have a record.
holiday season, and I think in DC, we were, with my wife at the Container Store, and they happened to have a competition where you could win a gift certificate, and I kept refusing to join, but my wife got me into it, and then I won it. We got an awesome $20 gift certificate.
I'm surprised you haven't climbed any 14ers though. That's surprising.
Yeah, I know. Growing up in Colorado, not having climbed a 14er is pretty unusual.
Okay, well, let's move on to Bob.
All right, here we go. I reordered these, so your philosophy on which one's the lie doesn't apply. That's right. So, I met my wife in grad school. I went to college on a track scholarship. and I got hit by a truck while flying an airplane.
Life in grad school.
Yeah, life in grad school. Didn't meet her there.
You gotta tell the truck story, man.
It always is. So I was flying a little Cessna 152, tiny little airfield, uncontrolled airfield up in Pennsylvania. And there's a road literally about 10 feet from the end of the runway. They have these little flashing lights that say yield to low flying aircraft. And I'm sitting on the left side of the airplane where you sit when you're by yourself. And I'm coming down final approach, and next thing I know, I hear this thump, and I'm looking out the side of the airplane at the runway. I go around, and I'm trying to figure out what just happened. I look over my shoulder, I see a
卫星的投影已经投到那里。这卫星升高以后，随着落日的方向，它就把自己的影子投到了那里。真他妈的漂亮！我靠！
Standing by the runway, I fly by. I'm like, okay, you have just a strut on your left side and nothing on the right side. Still have no idea what happened at this point. I just know all that stuff flew off the airplane at some point. Anyway, we landed on the runway. I mean, it's a Cessna, so you land at 45 knots, something like that. So touchdown, it spins around in the airplane. We all get out and we're standing around like a bunch of hillbillies kind of going, man, that was cool. And this tractor trailer comes driving down, pulls over the 10 feet of grass, drives up the runway, and he goes, you hit my truck. And he lifts up the back, and we look in, an empty trailer, and you can see skidded right across the top, one of the spars that holds the skin on the top of the truck. I skidded right across it.
Wow. So it was a lie then, because you hit the truck.
Not true. That was for insurance purposes. So the truth was twisted. So they now have a displaced threshold down there at that airport, 300 feet down, so that there's no hazards on the thing. So that's all due to me.
You got an amazing
or the truck
story,
driver, actually. It's all due to me. So it was funny though. He's calling us insurance company, and they go, "Okay, we had an accident." And he said, "Okay, what's the vehicle type?" And he's like, looks at me, and I'm like,
卫星在向
They're like, we don't have that in our database.
一边移动。
Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's move
太
on
阳
to
在落山，所以影子就会往上走，影子就会往西边的上方移动。
I've climbed one of the 7 summits.
太美了，我靠！
I built model rockets in high school.
我的
And
天
I can do a
呐！
standing front flip.
You're too tall for a front flip. Your rotational inertia is too big. No chance.
Pretty spectacular. I think I've seen him do it.
You had to have built up the rockets.
He was known for rocket making as a kid. So.
Back to front flip.
Among circles of rocket makers. Actually, BK said something about him making rockets.
The summit? Yeah.
Yeah.
Summit.
It's the front flip.
Oh.
Can't do a front flip.
I was going to say, if that was the truth, we would definitely have a demonstrator.
Rotational inertia.
You're too tall.
Can you do a backflip?
I cannot.
Not even off the diving board?
Never tried. It just seems really scary.
So which summit did you climb?
Whoa, 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 whoa!
All right, very cool.
Oh, very nice.
Very cool. Okay, Johnny, you're up.
So, number 1, I wrote, enlisting in the Navy was the best decision of my life. Number 2, I got in trouble overseas after being on the phone next to a generator after a mortar attack and not being there for the head count. And I am a hot dog eating champion of my local high school.
Hot dogs.
说不出话呀！
Yeah, I think your marriage is personal. We'll let you get a pass on that.
Johnny, tell the truth. Which was the lie?
Hot dogs.
Is that the hot dogs? Yeah, that was the lie. I am now in trouble.
It's a sad puppy face. You figured me out.
Oh.
Love it.
So what, that generator story, that was...
I definitely got in trouble with my platoon for, where's Johnny? And I was outside on the phone. So.
Oh man. Okay, we're glad you're okay. All right, Rob, you're up.
All right, so inspected a rocket booster while it had liquid oxygen on board. Skied off the summit of Denali wearing a Superman cape. Or went rock climbing with a broken ankle while wearing an astronaut helmet.
What was the second one?
Skied off the summit of Denali wearing a Superman cape.
I'll go with that one. Yeah, I'll go with that one.
You guys are too easy.
So what kind of cape was it?
Well, that was the last.
What was the last one again?
Went rock climbing with a broken ankle while wearing an astronaut helmet.
Why?
I didn't realize it was broken. It just kept giving out on me.
No, why do you
We're safe. No, we one of those padded astronaut helmets like you see in the costume store.
哎呦，今儿真是绝了，今儿。
Some sort of gag with the
今儿怎么能遇到这种美？
Okay, that was
这
awesome.
这热度
Jasmine,
防护又不够。
All right.
让我再进去躲
I'm
几
an
秒。
on to an incredibly cute and well-mannered 4-year-old little girl. In college, I was a member of the varsity basketball, lacrosse, volleyball, and cross-country teams. And I was pushed down a flight of stairs by my brother when I was 2.
You don't seem like you'd be well behaved.
I think it's something the second one. I think
Yeah, one of those
is fake in the list.
No, it's too many. That would be weird.
Why not?
Or maybe her niece is not well behaved.
Oh, you or your niece?
I think she really.
卫星的影子彻底消失了，错开了。
No, no, no.
I didn't do that many sports in 3 seasons.
Yeah, you can't.
Oh, you can do
But
it.
there's many
My
in
niece.
high school.
Oh, okay.
Alright.
I thought it was you.
My 4-year-old.
Yeah, sports. Let's go sports.
Once she gets that varsity letter, she just moves on to the next sport.
I'm gonna go with stairs. I think she pushed her brother down the stairs.
The werewolf skills coming out.
So which one is it?
All right, I don't have a 4-year-old niece.
Anymore.
That was so descriptive.
I pushed her down the stairs.
So how did you make time for all the sports?
So I played volleyball my freshman year, volleyball and lacrosse my freshman year, cross country, basketball and lacrosse my sophomore year, and then basketball and lacrosse my junior and senior year.
Wow. Very impressive.
That's awesome.
I believed all along, John.
Okay, so we have about 2 more minutes, so let's go on to Lou.
I am not equipped to.
All right, so I eat tacos at least half the days of the week.
Respect.
In middle school, I used to get in trouble for talking out loud in class all the time, and I once won a no-shower marathon.
Middle school.
Middle school.
Does that mean 4 days a week or 3 days a week? Or 3.5? Like, how does this work?
3 or 4 days.
It's a technicality.
Yeah, technicality.
Well, welcome back to Houston. This is you got to pick a really no shower contest.
Yeah, so I rode on the crew team, and
okay.
my freshman year, the women's team decided to do a no-shower marathon. So starting, it was like the end of October, we just stopped showering. So we were going to practice like once or twice a day and going to class and everything. And,
classmates.
yeah, it was pretty rough by the end of it. We actually called it. There were 2 of us still left. So I'm a co-champion.
How many days did you make it?
It's like 21 days.
Wow. All right, well, you'll be well prepared for space because they actually do the wet wipe showers when you're in there, so you'll be ready.
Yeah, no wet wipes.
Okay, so Frank.
All right. So I started dating my wife in high school. I've flown a handmade Russian aircraft while deployed, and I once owned 4 ducks, a rabbit, and 6 guinea pigs at the same time.
What was the second one?
I once flew a handmade Russian aircraft while deployed.
We're clear.
No, I think the animals are true.
I think the ducks are true.
What was the wife?
What was the wife?
I started dating my wife in high school.
Stay here forever.
I believe that one.
Sitting next to Tina. I'll go with the
Yeah, no, it was a Hungarian aircraft. So.
technicalities.
I like how we always believe.
That's a lot of
Yeah, so we had 3 guinea pigs, 3 female guinea pigs. Somehow one of them got pregnant and had babies, and so afterwards we had 6 guinea pigs. Little sneaky guy.
哦，这怎么有这种稀有地形？岩石沙漠，很难找哎。大家看你你这也太难找了，这岩石沙漠。
I eat extremely slowly, and I won an Olympic medal.
Landing initiated. Watch the flaring.
I think the Olympic medal would have been in your bio.
It's the first one.
Olympic medal in what?
She won a medal. I think she did too. I think it's the first one. The line. What was the first one?
I watch American Ninja Warrior.
You're a fast eater. You said the second one's
She is a slow eater. She's taken to-go boxes everywhere we've gone.
So medal or Ninja Warrior?
I think it's the Ninja Warrior line.
That's not.
The lie is that I won an Olympic medal, but I appreciate that you guys
Took your time,
I'm like, it would have been
But you did win a couple of rugby championships, right?
Yes.
Yeah, very cool. Okay. All right, guys, thanks so much for taking the time to play this
没有
game,
任何
get
人
to
类
know you a
设
little
施
bit better.
这
For our
里
viewers and listeners, if you want to know the real biographies of these guys, the real long, informative ones, just go to nasa.gov/2017 astronauts. We have the bios of each one of these guys up here, and you can learn more about them. So, guys, it's been a pleasure talking with you today, and best of luck on your transition to moving to Houston and to start training. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
So playing that game, we got to know like a little bit more of a personal side to them and a little bit of the stories. Just you know, they've obviously had a ton of experiences, both personal and professional, all over the place. But really, I mean, you had, like you said, over 18,000 applications, and you had to narrow it down to 12. So these people are some of the best, the brightest minds in the United States right now. So I just thought we'd go through them and talk more, maybe about their qualifications. Starting, like I said in the Two Truths and a Lie game, alphabetically. I thought, you know, we announce them alphabetically. Let's play the game alphabetically and then go through. So Kayla, Lieutenant, U.S. Navy, and she was in the submarine. Is that right?
Yes,
Yeah.
and she was one of the first women commissioned into the submarine force.
Incredible.
So previously, only men had been accepted into that unit within the Navy. So she was in the first class of women to be integrated into the submarine force.
That's incredible, and her leadership skills probably showed that, right? Just I guess she presented herself in a great way during those interviews.
Absolutely, and really they all did, right? But to add that extra experience of living and working and leading on a submarine, there are a lot of direct parallels that I think apply to living and working in space in another extreme environment.
Yeah, exactly. You're in an enclosed space. You have only metal around you to look at, pretty much, and yeah, it's hazardous, and you have to work with the people that you're in this tight space with.
Yep.
I think one of the questions we asked them when we interviewed them on Skype was, you know, what makes you a good person to be trapped in an enclosed space with, and a lot of them said, you know, I pack light, or, you know, they said I don't take up a lot of space, or I'm a quiet sleeper, you know, stuff like that. So they were, it was fun. So Zena, close to my heart, being a Penn Stater, but she's got quite a resume, going for her PhD of geoscience at Penn State University and a couple Antarctic expeditions.
Yeah, she had some field experience in Antarctica. Zena is, as you probably noticed if you watched any of the coverage from last week, probably never goes anywhere without a smile on her face. It was probably one of the best phone calls that we have made, because you could tell she was just so happy and so overwhelmed and just so moved. So
Yeah, I think personality's got to be one of a driving factor to be an astronaut, right? Because referring back to that statement, you have to be in an enclosed environment with people for long periods of time. You have to make sure you have a good personality and that you're going to get along.
MK1 我觉得太瘦了，我还是喜欢
variety of skill sets, but certainly one of the questions that always comes up is right, every person has quirks to their personality, but can you modulate as you need to in those environments?
So and another part, I guess, is just the diversity of the candidates. We already so we talked about Kayla Barron from the U.S. Navy, worked in a submarine. Zena Cartman, more of a scientist. Raja Chari he is a pilot, a U.S. pilot. He was part of the U.S. Navy test pilot school and was flying F-35s. Is that the one? I can't remember. Is that the one that has the vertical takeoff and landing one?
That's the new, and this is out of my area of expertise, right? But the new aircraft that's coming online for all of the service branches, and I think each service branch has some modifications to suit their various platforms. But certainly one of the newest and probably most cutting edge pieces of technology coming into the military, and he's been responsible for leading a significant portion of the testing efforts around that in relation to the U.S. Air Force.
So he'll be good with kind of familiarizing himself with brand new spacecraft and figuring stuff out, learning the quirks. I know coming up here, we got some new spacecraft that the astronauts are going to fly, right? We got the SpaceX Crew Dragon and the Boeing Starliner. They're actually going to be flying these brand new vehicles on top of other things. You got the Orion capsule too. So he's going to be very good, probably a good person to pilot that. He also has a master's degree from MIT in aeronautics and astronautics, so he's very familiar with the skies and beyond, I guess.
Yep, we hope so.
Yeah. Okay, so Matt Dominic, lieutenant commander in the U.S. Navy, also some engineering experience, and a pilot serving in FA-18E Pilot Strike Fighter Squadron. 1,600 hours of flight time over several combat missions. We got quite a few pilots, I guess. I think I forget the number.
Three.
Three pilots.
We hired 3 pilots in this class.
Okay.
So yeah, Matt certainly I think will add a lot to this class as well. One of the things that probably isn't on his resume, but that we had the pleasure of learning about through the interview process, is also a really great cook. So I'm sure that will enhance the experience for his classmates.
For sure. Have you seen some of the things that Jack Fisher is making on board too? He takes pictures of them. He makes like crazy burritos and all kinds of stuff.
So Matt should be well prepared for that.
Oh, yeah.
And certainly, right, we were fortunate to have him here last week for the event. When we notified him, he was actually on board an aircraft carrier on deployment. And so it was questionable for a time as to whether he could get off the carrier to be here in Houston to meet the rest of his classmates. So again, very, very lucky that we had the support of the Navy to help us get him here in person.
Absolutely. I remember, so we were going through the Skype interviews right after they got selected. We wanted to interview them and get a couple words from them before they came on, because we knew, their schedules were just going to be so hectic. We wanted to make sure we could ask them plenty of questions in a reasonable amount of time. And he actually had to cancel the interview that I was going to do with him because he had a mission. And so we rescheduled, and I think Dan was the one who ended up interviewing him. But it was really, like you said, it was really nice that he was able to accommodate his schedule for us. Another person, Bob Hines, I guess very special to us because he's from the Johnson Space Center, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people here knew him and were, wide-eyed, I guess, when he went on the stage. Oh my gosh, there's Bob. That's cool.
He was our second pilot that we picked out of the group, and is what we would call a local, in that he already lived here and was part of the NASA family. So certainly excited to make that transition from being an instructor pilot out at Ellington Field into the astronaut corps.
Absolutely. And he's going to be, like you said, we have these pilots here because they're the ones that will be flying the new vehicles, and it's very exciting. So Woody Hoberg is from actually Pennsylvania. Actually talking with him, he went to a high school that competed with my high school. Also, actually, Bob Hines went to that same high school.
Yeah,
they both went to North Allegheny.
And that out of 18,000, that's kind of a small world fact right there.
Two of them from the same high school is crazy.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it is pretty awesome. Undergraduate degree in aeronautical and astronautical engineering from MIT, PhD in electrical and computer science from University of California, Berkeley, and he's an assistant professor at MIT. Very smart man.
Very smart indeed. And again, right, having that academic perspective, I think it lends him to have kept up with kind of some of the cutting edge trends in engineering in terms of, right, one of his main roles at MIT is to mentor a group of students working in a lab. So I think he comes with some very sharp and hands-on engineering skills.
Exactly, and very diverse too. Aeronautical, astronautical,
今天把这个斯特利克特
electrical, and computer
3A 探完
Yeah, pretty much covers it all,
下
right?
一次就是
He'll be able to
B
do it all. All right, this next guy, Johnny Kim, super cool. Enlisted in the U.S. Navy as a Navy SEAL, over 100 combat missions, earned the Silver Star and Bronze Star. Also graduated with a degree in math from University of San Diego and got his MD at Harvard Medical School. So he's a doctor and a Navy SEAL. Crazy.
Yeah, he is, you know, a great patriot, and right, his time in the Navy was recognized with a Silver Star as well as a Bronze Star with Valor. So certainly,
今天就先
an
到这
American hero.
拜拜
Truly amazing. And the fact that these, I mean, as we're going through, I'm realizing everyone's got, you know, they don't just do one thing.